Israel's highly anticipated ground offensive could be launched at any moment. Both sides are trading rocket fire for a 10th straight day. Buildings were destroyed in Gaza as sirens are heard in cities like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis there in Gaza is getting worse. Officials say hospitals in the territory are almost out of basic necessities. We're speaking of clean water, food, and fuel. They also say many patients simply cannot be moved elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are fleeing south from Gaza City right now. Israel has warned over the weekend it would advance into Gaza by land, air, and sea. The U.S. and several other countries are attempting to negotiate with Egypt to let aid in, and Palestinian Americans out through the Rafah crossing. At this stage in this conflict, more than 4,100 people have died on both sides. At least 30 Americans are included in that number as well. Additionally, Israeli officials say roughly 200 people are being held hostage right now by Hamas, which is more than was initially reported. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is back in Israel, meeting with officials there in an effort to prevent this conflict from spilling into other parts of the region.
You know our deep commitment to Israel's right, indeed its obligation, to defend itself and to defend its people. And in that, you have and will always have the support of the United States.
CBS News reporter Haley Ott joins us now from Jerusalem. And Haley, we should note that you, as is true of many other people there, heard sirens indicating rocket fire and had to head inside a short time ago, just to give a sense of what's happening in real time. But we know that Israel gave residents in northern Gaza 24 hours to evacuate last week, but still has not launched its ground attack yet. Bring us up to speed on where that stands right now.
Yes, you're exactly right. We know that Israeli troops have massed along the border with Gaza. Hundreds of thousands have been called up, and Israeli military leaders have said they're ready to do whatever the mission is once they're ordered, once they're given the go-ahead. And they're waiting for political leaders to make that decision. Why that decision hasn't been made, we do not know. It could be some of the things that you outlined earlier, perhaps the attempt to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, perhaps the attempt to negotiate a way to get foreigners, some Americans, out of Gaza. But we do not know. At this point, the troops remain on the border, and we remain waiting.
And we just took a look at a map that spells out the challenges in Gaza of moving 1 million people in the north to get to the south to evacuate, and also the challenges of crossing the Rafah border into Egypt. As thousands of Palestinians move, those who are able, including Palestinian Americans, what complications are they likely to face trying to get into Egypt just diplomatically? Talk to us about what the situation is there at the border with Egypt.
There are a million ways that this is incredibly difficult. The sheer number of people that have left their homes, that are displaced, moving all at once while airstrikes are ongoing in Gaza. And then we've just heard reports that there were more Israeli airstrikes near the area of the Rafah border crossing. That is something Egypt has specifically said it needed to stop in order to consider opening that crossing. We don't know what this might mean for any negotiations that may be taking place behind the scenes. You've got Palestinians, people living in Gaza, Palestinian Americans, all sleeping by the border. They've been advised, some of them, that if it may open at any moment, maybe just for a few hours for the people with international passports. So they've just been staying in the area. Others have given up. They've been waiting for so long, and there's no infrastructure there to support that amount of people. So they are returning back to not even their homes, to the places that they might have stayed a little bit before or just somewhere else. So the situation there is really precarious, and a really, really acute humanitarian crisis is growing there.
Haley, what you're saying really spells out the chaos of the moment, the chaos of this conflict, the fact that rocket fire is still taking place daily in both directions. Meanwhile, in the north, I understand, Israel has ordered something like 28 communities near its border with Lebanon to evacuate. Spell out for us what we know about the situation between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Yes. An escalating crisis on Israel's northern border with Lebanon could take this horrible war and make it exponentially worse. Currently, some of those hundreds of thousands of reservists that Israel has called up, those troops have been sent to fortify that border area. Hezbollah, the militant group in Lebanon, and Israeli forces have been exchanging fire for the past few days, but it hasn't escalated beyond that. There have been a handful of casualties, but it hasn't grown into something that's a full-scale conflict. If it did, that would be incredibly bloody and incredibly dangerous, and would potentially bring in many other players in the region and turn this into a real crisis. So everybody's working behind the scenes, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, to try to make sure that that does not happen.
Delicate situation indeed. Haley Ott, thank you for that. Please do stay safe.